Okay, this series of shiurim is intended to be an introduction to Maseches Eruvin, specifically for Lemdei Daf Yomi. Now, there's a notion out there that if you take a complex topic and you introduce it with a simplified introduction, that somehow the complex topic will just become simple. And I wish it would work that way, but it doesn't. And of course, the intention here is really to try to make Maseches Eruvin more accessible for Lemdei Daf Yomi. And we put a lot of thought into it, and we really came to the conclusion that Eruvin is not so much the complexity that's a challenge. It's really the abstract nature of all these topics. Now, we don't live in a chutzner. We don't have a mavli, we don't have these alleyways that were common in the times of Chazal. Even our Rishus Harabim, our public domain, does not function the way the public domain functioned in times of Chazal. So essentially, the Maseches Eruvin ends up being solutions to problems that we don't really have, and using implements, for example, like a lechi. Now, lechi is a board, kaira, a beam. Now, in practical halachic use, these implements really fell out of practice. So, putting together the fact that the domains are not really what we're used to, and the implements are not what we're used to, the topic becomes very abstract, and it makes it very hard to retain, very hard for us to properly visualize these things. The purpose of this shiurim is to take the halacha concepts, organize them, but then take it a step further and to create a shiur that will bridge the gap, that will take these abstract concepts and try to bring them into practical application, help us visualize them, and make it a lot easier to understand the Masechta that way. Also, Eruvin is not just a conglomeration of halachic concepts. It's also a thought process. It's a thought process, a unique thought process. You look at a domain and you try to figure out what this domain, what it takes to properly enclose it, what it takes to make this into Rishus HaYachid. And we'll try to introduce not just the concepts, but the thought process of Maseches Eruvin, and using carefully picked case studies to try to bring this down to a more practical level and to give us the thought process. And that again will be a very big tool to help us understand the Masechta. Now, the Masechta is really comprised of four primary topics, and we're going to try to commit a full shiur to each of these four topics. The first of these topics, or actually the first three, really relate to one central theme. And in Masechtas Shabbos, we discussed halacha of Eitzah. Eitzah is one of the 39 malachas, and that relates to the fact that you're not allowed to carry between a Rishus Harabim, a public domain, and a Rishus HaYachid, a private domain. Now, Rishus Harabim is something very specific. As the Gemara defines it as a sratya or platya gedola. A sratya is similar to our word of street. Platya, a street, a main place that's meant for hiluch harabim, for public traffic. Gedola, which is a large public street, or a platya, more like a plaza, something that's meant for congregating, but also a very public domain with a few other set of prerequisites, tesayinama, not having a roof. Perhaps it requires 600,000 people. So that's Rishus Harabim, and it's an extreme public domain. And then on the other end, we have Rishus HaYachid, a private domain. And carrying from Rishus Harabim all the way to the other end of the extreme, to Rishus HaYachid, that is a chashuv malacha that's asur on Shabbos. And on a deraisa level, the entire in between, the entire karmelis, in between Rishus Harabim and Rishus HaYachid, has no Isser Eitzah. Eitzah does not relate to a karmelis. So, on a deraisa level, there's no point in trying to create a Rishus HaYachid. There's no benefit of having a Rishus HaYachid. However, on a derabanan level, the Rabbanan say we're not allowed carrying we're not going to allow you to carry unless the area is a complete and total Rishus HaYachid, and went even beyond that. And that's what the first three topics of Eruvin really relate to. Mechitzas, Rishus Harabim, and Chatzeros, it's all going to relate to creating a perfect Rishus HaYachid, even on the Rabbanan level. Now, the first of these three, Mechitzas. Mechitza is to create a correct, proper Rishus HaYachid, to allow carrying. You must have mechitzas. It has to be surrounded with proper, valid partitions. You can have a fence. It's a 10 tefachim tall. That's a perfect, complete mechitza. And now there are these other implements, a lechi, a kaira. These implements supplement. If you already have 3 walls, so on the 4th side you could put a kaira, a board, a beam, and this is something that's discussed. What does it take to create the sum total of a correct enclosure, which is the first step in creating a Rishus HaYachid. That's the halacha of mechitzas. The second thing that relates to creating this Rishus HaYachid is in the negative. We have to be able to create a Rishus HaYachid. We have to make sure that the area doesn't begin by being a Rishus HaRabim. If the area begins as a complete Rishus HaRabim, a complete public domain, so then the typical implements that are used to create a Rishus HaYachid will not be sufficient. You're going to have to do something else. Maybe you'll make dalsos, you'll make doors to prevent the Hilach HaRabim, to prevent the public traffic from flowing freely. So that's something else that we have to know. We have to know where is there a Rishus HaRabim and how that's going to affect the ability to make a Rishus HaYachid. The third, and that takes the halacha of Rishus HaYachid one step further. After you enclose it, and at the Raisa level, of course, it's a Rishus HaYachid, it's a complete Rishus HaYachid. The Chazal said, wait, there's something else that might be a concern here. Maybe it's a Rishus HaYachid, it's properly enclosed, but does it give the full impression of being Rishus HaYachid? Let's say I'm carrying something from my house. It's a private domain, and I'm going to be carrying from my house to a shared yard. So now, on a certain level, that may come across as I'm carrying from a Rishus HaYachid, my private house, it's only mine, to a yard. Okay, granted, it's enclosed and it's really Rishus HaYachid, but it doesn't have the same impression. It's shared with other people. Perhaps that could be confused with the fact that with a Rishus HaRabim, I'm carrying from a more private to a lesser private domain. So the Chazal said, no, that's also not good. And you somehow have to make this yard using an Erev Chatzeris, a food item, which will be discussed in the later prakim of Maseches Eruvin. You have to do something to create the impression that, no, this is not a shared yard, this is a private yard, and then you could carry from your house to the yard, and various other halachas come into play. So that's the halach of Erev Chatzeris. The fourth topic of Maseches Eruvin relates to Erev Techumim. Now, Techumim is really a different concept, but it shares the same word, Erev. It also uses the word Erev. And Erev Techumim relates to a different type of Isser. There is an Isser that once somebody is, he's situated in a city, the beginning of Shabbos, so that becomes his Makom Dir, that's where he's going to be for Shabbos. Now, once that gets established, he's only allowed to walk 2,000 amas in each direction from his city where he is situated in the beginning of Shabbos. Suppose somebody wants to be able to go 4,000 amas. So what could he do? Right. So he is bound by his tchum of 2,000 amas. So there's something called an Erev Techumim, which allows him to go a bit further. You put the Erev Techumim, let's say, at the end of 2,000 amas, and now he could go 2,000 amas further. He could walk in further in that direction. So that's the fourth topic that's Mitzvah Shem going to be addressed in a fourth share dedicated to the halachas of Erev Techumim.